Great. So I am going to actually share a quote with you written by a foreign journalist, and then we're going to have a little audience participation. I'm going to ask all of you to guess when this was written. And this is describing Kashmir. The story is sickeningly familiar in this day and age, a tale of persecution, repression, midnight arrests, and aggrandizement of the local quote-unquote big brother. A rigid censorship exists. All public assemblies and gatherings, except regime-sponsored ones, are banned. The prisons are full to overflowing, and those behind bars include 25 or more political leaders, among them a former prime minister, who are being detained under a local law which permits imprisonment without charge or trial on executive order alone for periods up to 5 years. As to the recent elections there, Hitler and Stalin could have approved of their conception and execution. In the Vale of Kashmir itself, only 5 out of a total of 45 constituencies were contested, all the others returning unopposed ruling party candidates. Moreover, even where the 5 contests did occur, permitted opposition candidature was limited to purely domestic controversy. This was inevitable, since it is unlawful under the constitution imposed from Delhi last year for anyone to declare for any policy under the status quo of absorption into India. So does anyone want to guess what year this is from? Someone said recently? Anyone else? I guess the other option would be not recently. This was written by Frederick M. Bennett in a 1958 issue of The Atlantic. And I share this with you for a very particular reason, because I want to highlight that the unilateral abrogation of Article 370 on August 5th did not represent a departure from the norm of India's rule in Kashmir.
Exactly.
Instead, this was simply an escalation of India's ongoing military repression, draconian restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly, and widespread impunity for arbitrary detention, torture, and political prosecutions in Kashmir. So, as many of you know, on August 5th, to facilitate the unilateral abrogation of Article 370, Kashmir was placed under siege with a telecommunications shutdown that cut Kashmiris off from their own neighbors, not to mention the rest of the world. To carry out these actions, India preemptively curtailed massive popular protest and dissent by imposing a severely repressive siege, including an intensification of already substantial troop deployments, communications blockades, undeclared curfews, widespread detentions, and other human rights violations. Kashmir activists, lawyers, and academics are only beginning to analyze the situation and the potential implications of these massive legal transformations. These were carried out in contravention of international law and without the consent of the governed. India's unilateral anti-democratic abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A does not change Kashmir's status as a disputed territory under international law, to be resolved in accordance with UN Security Council resolutions on the basis of the principle of self-determination. I'd like to talk a little bit about the internet shutdown because there is a lot of information being propagated indicating that the Supreme Court somehow restored the internet in Kashmir through an order. And I'd like to tell you that that is patently false. In the Supreme Court decision on the internet shutdown in Kashmir, the state refused to produce the orders that it passed under Section 144 and the 2017 telecom suspension rules for 5 months. These orders were the legal bases for the fundamental rights restriction, and they cited terrorism to argue that it was exempted from following the proportionality standard. Although the Supreme Court did provide dictum about the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution, it held that because the internet shutdown orders had not been placed before it, which the state had been ordered to provide to the court, it could not engage in judicial review. The Supreme Court did not rule on the validity of the internet shutdown or the imposition of Section 144 throughout the valley. They only ordered that the administrative agency ordering the orders review those orders within that same administrative agency. I bring this up because I think it's really important to underscore there is no judicial check on the internet shutdown, and there is no judicial check on the human rights violations that are occurring in Kashmir. The Public Safety Act and the Armed Forces Special Powers Act have long enabled a culture of impunity for violent state actors in Kashmir. AFSPA grants broad powers to bestow immunity from prosecution to the Army in civilian courts by requiring the central government to sanction all prospective prosecutions. The Public Safety Act authorizes administrative detention orders for vaguely defined activities, including, quote, acting in any manner prejudicial to the security of the state. It does not provide for judicial review of detention, and state authorities, when they have orders from the Jammu and Kashmir High Court to release people, simply issue successive detention orders. So, before August 5th, there were thousands languishing in jail. But after August 5th, thousands more were arrested. There's no clear statement on how many were booked under administrative detention, but we know that about 412 habeas corpus petitions challenged under the PSA were submitted, and I'm not aware of a single case in which a habeas corpus petition actually resulted in the release of a prisoner. One 76-year-old lawyer named Mia Qayyum, who is the president of the Kashmiri Bar Association, has been detained under the act. He's an elderly diabetic who's had a heart attack under detention who needs urgent medical care. And the High Court recently dismissed a petition challenging his detention. Again, I bring this up to you because it might be convenient to believe that with an administration change or different people in power, the situation in Kashmir will improve, but it will not. These human rights violations come every time the people of Kashmir have a modicum of freedom to express their political will. So long as that political will is not expressing a desire to be absorbed into India, they are violently repressed. And I can speak personally as a person who is impacted by generation after generation of this violence. In order to solve this human rights crisis once and for all, the will of the Kashmiri people has to be taken into account. I'd like to conclude my remarks by drawing some linkages between what's happening in parts of India with the CAA and NRC. We are very concerned that when the CAA and NRC are implemented in Kashmir, Kashmiri people who rely on Kashmiri documents to prove their residence may be considered not to be residents of that territory, depending on how those administrative rules are promulgated. We already know that massive deforestation has occurred. We already know that mining rights are being farmed out to outside organizations. And we already know that land banks are being created to be distributed to the private sector for a song. And this could lead to what we're already seeing the beginnings of in other parts of India, which is mass detention, deportation, and conversion of a people into a stateless people. If you could just give me one more second, I'd just like to say about the internet and the recommendations. There must be freedom of speech, there must be freedom of assembly. People must have unfettered access to the internet. Currently in Kashmir, you have a list of initially 100, then 400, now 1,500 websites that you're allowed to look at, and nothing else. And that must be lifted immediately.